Hi, this is Don Farber with VineyardSoft Corporation, and I'd like to welcome you to this third training session on query designing in the KnowledgeSync Alerts and Workflows solution. This session will specifically cover the Columns tab within the Query Designer. In a previous session, we began our design of a new query to identify customers whose accounts receivable balance over 90 days past due was greater than a certain amount. So I am going to reopen that query and we are going to continue our work on it. Just as a quick review of what we've done previously, we've chosen to have this query retrieve data from two tables in our accounting database, the customer and salesperson table, and we have linked those two tables together. At this point, we are ready to start choosing the individual fields of data, or columns, that we want KnowledgeSync to retrieve from the underlying database for this particular query. As mentioned previously, it's really helpful if you have first designed on a piece of paper or whiteboard what you want the alert message about this particular condition to say. We haven't taken those steps ourselves, however, we're going to do that along with you right now. So, if we've got an account that's very past due, what sort of fields of information might we wish to put into an outgoing alert message? Well, in this particular accounting application, the over 30, over 60, over 90, and over 120 day past due amounts are all stored, or I should say each stored, in 4 different fields, aging categories 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's choose those 4 fields of data because we might want to put them into an alert message. And here's a rule. If you want the ability to include a field of data in an alert message, you first need to have selected that field within the corresponding query. Now, just because I've chosen these 4 fields for this query, that doesn't mean that I have to put them into the alert message, but rather I will be given the option to include any or all of those 4 fields. Let's scroll down a little bit further and see what we have. Balance forward, might want to include that. Let's see what else we have. Credit limit, sounds like a valuable piece of information. Customer name and customer number, I certainly think so. Let's see what else we have here. We could choose other fields such as date created, date established. I personally like date of last activity to know, is this customer still purchasing from us? Let's see what else we have. A few other date fields. Now here we come across an interesting field. It's the customer's email address. Now, rule number 2. If you want an event in KnowledgeSync to be able to deliver an alert, such as an email message, to a person who is related to the condition that you're looking for, in this case, I might want to notify the customer whose over 90-day balance is greater than a certain amount, I need to include the field that contains that customer's email address. And so I am absolutely going to include this email address field. That's going to give me the ability to configure the event to actually send an alert message back to the customer. Let's see what else we have here. We've got other fields of information. I don't know if these are all terribly important. Let's just scroll through those. Telephone number, that might be handy. We'll include the customer's telephone number and even their extension. And now let's see what else we've got. All right, we've now moved from the customer table to the salesperson table. Now I know that I want to include the salesperson's name. So let's find that field. Salesperson name. Okay. And if we go down to our list at the bottom, just to confirm, yep, it's been added to our list of columns for this query. Now you can select a column either by double-clicking on it from this list, just as I have done, or you can simply single-click on a column and choose to add that column to the query. Now, you know, our discussion about how we might want to notify the customer that they are rather significantly overdue also brings to mind the idea that I probably want to notify the customer's sales rep that this client of theirs is particularly overdue. And I believe that the sales rep's email address is also a field that I can choose from. In this case, the email address being within the sales rep or salesperson table. So I'm going to add that column as well to this query, and we can see it added down at the bottom. Okay, that's probably enough fields for right now. Once I get to actually designing the alert message, I might find that there are some additional fields that I need, but for right now, I think we're good. But there are other steps that we need to take before moving on from the Columns tab. Now you'll notice if we scroll to the top of our list of selected columns that we see the column name here. We also see a field called Column Type. And in fact, all of the columns that we've chosen have a column type of normal. If you remember from the very first training course on query designing, we mentioned, in fact, that there are 3 types of queries that can be designed in the KnowledgeSync system: record-level queries, aggregate queries, and field value change queries. This query that we're designing right now is a record-level query because we want KnowledgeSync to retrieve the details of individual records that meet certain criteria. We want to see the details of customer accounts whose 90-day balance is greater than a certain amount. If this were an aggregate query, if, for example, we wanted to total up all of our customers' balances who were at least 90 days overdue, well, that's a situation where I could use, for example, the column type sum, or the average function, the aggregate function summarize. We're going to get into aggregates a little bit later, so I'm not going to talk more about them now, but rather move on to the column just to the right called Customized Name. Now, you may have noticed that whenever we chose a column for this particular query, KnowledgeSync automatically took the name of the column, aging category 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and automatically took that and made it the customized name for the selected column. What is the customized name for? Well, the customized name is your way of giving a field a more friendly name. For example, you might notice here aging category 1 is kind of all run together, and although we know that it really means over 30 days, the application itself, the database, didn't refer to it quite in that manner. So we can change the customized name. We could change it to read over 30 days. And we could similarly change the customized names for aging category 2, 3, and 4 to over 60 days, over 90 days, and over 120 days. Now, you might want to do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, to make the fields a little friendlier, to make them a little more obvious in terms of the values they actually contain. And that's important because when we get to the step of designing the actual alert message, we're going to get presented with a list of fields that we can put into that alert message, and that list is going to be the list of customized names. So if we make those customized names as friendly, as intuitive as possible, then whether it's we who are designing the alert message or someone else, they should have a pretty easy time on determining what values actually are stored in the different fields in the database. Now, I know that there's definitely 1 or 2 fields here whose customized names I'm going to want to change. Most of these fields are fairly obvious: balance forward, credit limit, customer name, customer no, date last activity. But then I come to this field called email address. Well, it's true that this field does contain an email address, but it actually contains the customer's email address. So I think I'm going to modify this field a little bit, and I'm simply going to put cust underscore in front of it so that it reads cust email address. And as you can probably guess, we chose another email address field here. It's the email address of the salesperson. So I'm going to do something similar here and preface this customized name with sales rep. That way, again, when I'm using this query in an event, when I'm designing the alert message, when I'm specifying who's going to be notified, There won't be any confusion versus one field called email address and another field called email address too. Cust email address, sales rep email address. A lot easier to identify. Now you may have noticed when I've been modifying these few customized names that I didn't include blank spaces. I did not, for example, have it read sales rep space email address. And that's just a wise habit to get into. Truth to be told, different applications, different databases respond differently to blanks in a customized name. Some databases will accept them, other databases won't. I like to play it safe. Therefore, if I do want to create a multi-word customized name, whether it's sales rep email address or up at the very top here, over 30 days, I do separate those fields with underscores. A couple of other hints about the customized name. I'd recommend that you not make them exceedingly long. Try and keep them to 25 characters or less. And also, try not to start a customized name with an arithmetic function. For example, try not to start a customized name with the word add or subtract or divide. Will this result in an error? Truth to be told, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's not determined by KnowledgeSync, it is rather determined by the kind of database that KnowledgeSync is monitoring. But if you use these simple rules, do not include embedded blanks, do not make the customized name exceedingly long, and do not start a customized name with what would be considered a reserved word, typically an arithmetic function, chances are you're going to be just fine. Okay, so we have now changed our few fields, customized names as desired. So let's move just one further field over to the right. You'll notice a column called Unique. And in fact, this is a very important field. What the unique field or column is for a query is it is a way to give KnowledgeSync the ability to remember what records have met an event's criteria. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have an event that's identifying newly placed sales orders. Maybe you're automatically sending an order confirmation to a customer, or maybe you're just sending a nice friendly alert message to your CFO, letting that person know that a new order has been received. Now, an event like that might run multiple times throughout a day. Maybe it runs every half an hour or even every hour. Well, if that event runs at 9 in the morning and finds orders number 1, 2, and 3 have been newly placed, KnowledgeSync is going to see those orders and send the alerts to the appropriate people. Now, between 9 and 10 in the morning, orders 4 and 5 may have gotten added to the system. So when the event runs at 10 in the morning, the event that looks at newly placed sales orders, chances are that you want to notify people about the new orders, numbers 4 and 5, but you probably don't want to notify people about orders 1, 2, and 3 because you've already told them about those orders. In order to enable KnowledgeSync to remember what records it has already processed, we refer to this as triggered records in KnowledgeSync, you need in the query to identify a field that uniquely identifies a triggered record. In the case of newly placed orders, every order is uniquely identified by an order number. And so we would identify that order number field as the unique. So KnowledgeSync would remember orders 1, 2, and 3, newly send alerts about orders 4 and 5, and then use that unique order number value of 4 and 5, add them to 1, 2, and 3. Now KnowledgeSync has 5 triggered records in its database for that particular event, orders 1 through 5. Now, in the case of this particular query we're working on right now, we're not dealing with orders, rather we're dealing with customer accounts. So we need to ask ourselves, what field uniquely identifies every customer account? Well, in this particular accounting database, that would be the customer number. So I'm going to come over here to the right and put a check mark in the unique field of the customer number. Now, a couple of notes about the unique field. Number one, it is suggested that every record level query have a unique field checked. It will never do you any harm. What you'll find out a little bit later on in these training sessions is simply by specifying a unique column in a query, that act gives you the ability on an event level to specify whether or not you want an event to repeat notifications. Because in fact, there are some circumstances whereby you do want KnowledgeSync to repeat alerts. For example, a customer service situation whereby you're having KnowledgeSync send alerts about open support tickets, perhaps that have been open too long. Well, regardless of whether KnowledgeSync has already sent alerts about those open tickets, if those tickets continue to stay open, you probably do want KnowledgeSync to send repeated alerts. And as we'll see later on, you will have the opportunity to specify whether you want repeat notifications or not. By choosing a unique column in a query, that act gives you the ability to specify yes or no whether you do or do not wish to repeat alerts. And that option comes a little bit later in the event design process. But it is recommended that every record level query have a single unique column. One other note about the unique column, and that is that there are some occasions whereby the unique value for a query is not identifiable via a single field. Maybe, for example, we could consider, again, the sales order process. And if we're looking at sales orders and their detail lines, you need to ask yourself, well, what value uniquely identifies every sales order detail line? Is it the line number? No, because multiple orders can have line number 1. Is it the order number? No, it's not, because a single order can have multiple line items. So in a situation like that, your unique value actually consists of 2 columns, the order number as well as the line number. And that is what we refer to as creating a concatenated unique. And to do that, you would actually use a calculation here in KnowledgeSync, because concatenating or combining the values of 2 fields together is considered a type of calculation. We will get into creating calculated fields in a subsequent training session, but for right now, just please be aware that every query, every record level query, should have a single column flagged as unique, such as we've done here. And if you run into a situation whereby a query needs to have a multi-column unique, the answer to that is still a single field, but a single field that concatenates or combines the values of the appropriate individual fields that together uniquely identify a triggered record. Okay, before we leave the columns tab and before we put a conclusion to this particular training session, I do just want to draw your attention to one final object on the columns tab, and that's down at the bottom left, a checkbox titled Return Distinct Rows of Data Only. This is not an often used option. However, its purpose is to allow you to say, when this query runs and returns its result set, I do not want to see any duplicate records. Let me give you an example. Let's say that at the end of every week, you want KnowledgeSync to run a query that generates a list of all of the customers who purchased during that previous week. And if a customer purchased 47 times during the week, you still only want to see them listed once. Well, by clicking on this checkbox that says Return Distinct Rows of Data Only, that means that the query will not return any records where the result set is exactly the same. But do be aware that this Return Distinct function is going to be based on the columns that you have chosen for the query. So only if all of the columns have the same value for multiple records will a duplicate record be removed. Okay, I think that wraps up this particular training session on query designing, covering the columns tab for a query. In a subsequent training session, we will talk about the following two tabs, specifying the sorting order, as well as, most importantly, the filters or selection criteria for a query. At this point, I'm going to click on Save and Close to save my work as I've completed it thus far. I thank you very much for your time during this KnowledgeSync training session and look forward to speaking with you in a future training session. Again, my name is Don Farber with Vineyard Soft Corporation, and I thank you very much for your time and attention.